idea. Hey, it's been a minute. I am back to making videos. So just wanted to first say thank you to, let me just make sure I'm recording everything. I just want to say thank you to the people who have sent me messages and comments and things like that. I actually read all of them and try to respond, but to those of you who have been encouraging me, I'm a very private person generally, so I've been trying to get myself to do this again because I actually really love talking about this stuff. So yeah, thank you for that. Today I wanted to talk about a topic that someone requested a long time ago on FM synthesis on the Moog 1 because it can do analog FM and that can be sometimes tricky to work with. So I'm just going to go through some patches and talk a little bit about it. A couple of updates. As you can see, there are some really awesome new monitors. I will do a short video to talk about those. Just because, what am I going to do? Record the room while I'm listening to them? Obviously not. So, but they are amazing. They're the Barefoot Micro Main 26s. I've wanted these for a very, very, very long time, and they sound just absolutely phenomenal. So I'm not going to get into all that at the moment, because we're going to talk about this. So, yeah, let's get started. So this patch that I was playing... I love this patch. It is using some FM modulation and then some modulation of the FM modulation, which is always the trick with FM to get really interesting stuff. And then let's see on the expression pedal down here. One of the coolest things I love about this synthesizer and having a poly synth and in general is that you can change the release times for basically each individual voice, and it gives kind of a reverb effect without actually using any effects. So here's dry, and then here's wet. Cool, right? So it's you don't even need to put reverb on it to get kind of a nice reverby sound. And then I put some, I can't remember what, I think this increases the FM amount on the mod wheel, so it's kind of gnarly. Maybe I should play up here. That's what's going on. That's a Cascade Dead Mouse song, actually, so I'm going to stop playing so I don't get a copyright strike. I've never had that happen, but supposedly it does. But yeah, so back, just since I moved up an octave, so here's dry. And then on Aftertouch I have a little, you know, some, what's that thing that we all love? Vibrato. So... very cool. And wet. So yeah, got some other patches here. Why don't we run through them? This one has, this is a really good example because there are some different list layers. One of the things about FM, which we'll get into, actually maybe we'll start there. So there are a lot of different types of kind of, you know, modulation you can do to create harmonics. And I'm not going to talk about audio rate modulation. I'm not going to talk about, I might talk about audio rate modulation. Maybe we'll talk about phase modulation. But with respect to FM, you, when we think about something like the DX7 or the Waldorf Iridium that I have there, it doesn't actually do frequency modulation, right? It can, but what we normally consider FM synthesis is actually phase modulation. And that is because it's very easy for frequency modulation to result in pitches and tones that are unusable. So on the mini Moog that I have, you can do frequency modulation, but it's doing very traditional frequency modulation, which is called exponential FM. And exponential FM, if you think about it, you've got your carrier signal, right? So if I just initialize this patch, and LFO1 here is hardwired to introduce, this knob is hardwired to introduce the LFO1 to modulate the pitch of the oscillator. So if I hold this down, as expected, right? So if we use a triangle wave, it's a little quiet, so I turn this up. Not very many harmonics, right? If we were to look on that on a frequency analyzer, you wouldn't see many. And if I start turning this up, we start getting some cool modulation. Turn it up higher. It's getting kind of wild. Doesn't really sound good, but if we were to increase the speed, and let's say we're going to change this LFO to a sine wave, and we're setting the range to high, and it's bipolar, so sorry about that, bipolar, so it's going above and below a particular frequency. We start getting that cool stuff, So this is traditional exponential FM, and that means that so like on the LFO was set up to basically, on the original mini Moog, let's say, was set up to basically go above and to oscillate or to modulate the voltage, right? So you're saying if it's I don't remember how many volts it is per octave, but let's say an octave is like 5 volts or something like that. I don't even know if that's the right amount. Somebody can say in the comments, but we're going to go above and below, let's say an octave from middle C. So, but the problem is that if we think about like A440, we should actually be using that. So if we use A440, right? Like if we go, let's say, an octave below to this A, we're now down to 220 hertz. But if we go up an octave, then we're going to be at 880 hertz. So those obviously are two different frequency amounts. And the problem is that when we start modulating, right, an even amount of frequency distance, right, above and below, or excuse me, if we start going, not an equal distance, if we start going down to 220 and then up to 880, and we're going back and forth, like if you're walking back and forth between 2 points, the average of that point is going to be the center, and that ends up being the pitch center. And that's why we get that, and that's not going to be 440, right? It's going to be, math, 220 plus 880, it's going to be 550 hertz, I think, if I did my math correctly. So that means that if we play an A at 440, and we start modulating above and below, the pitch center is gonna change and go up. And so that's why it's called exponential FM. And it is actually very usable for some fun stuff. For example, what is this? No, not that one. Not that one. This might be loud. Let me turn it down. Church bell. That's the good one, yeah. Like, actually pretty much sounds like a church bell. And so you can get some very interesting, sounds, like those metallic sounds that we kind of love sometimes. But it's very hard for it to stay in pitch, and if I were to go back to an initialized patch, do that same thing over again that I did, set this back to a sine wave, A440, Oh, sorry about that. Not very usable, right? Well, one of the cool things you can do on this synth and a lot of synths is you can set up keyboard tracking to the rate of the oscillate, or excuse me, of the LFO. So now, still not very usable. Let's decrease the amount, let's say. So, let's change this back to a triangle wave, right? So no harmonics. And let's start increasing the amount. It takes some fiddling, and that's one of the reasons I love this type of synthesis, but also it's one of the things that turns so many people off from it, is that it's very hard to start getting something usable. And then at a certain point, like especially with exponential FM, it stops being usable. And so if I go back to that patch that I was telling you about, that I wanted to share, what's cool about having a polysynth is you can just set up your keyboard. You can set up your keyboard to, yeah, this is the one. This is actually using some phase modulation, but you can just set up your keyboard to ignore the unusable parts, right? So if you've got a usable, like usually the kind of mids, low mids are very usable and musical, and then kind of the highs start getting wonky. So you can actually just go in and just say like you want the highest note to be the last usable note. And then as you start getting up higher in frequencies, things just start sounding like saw waves anyway. So you can just then take a saw wave or something and you can match. So that's what I did on this particular patch to get some, let's play some stuff because that was a lot of talking. So let's see. That sounds pretty cool, right? So there's a lot of interesting fuzzy stuff going on. I was practicing something the other day. I'm trying to learn like jazz voicings. What was I doing? I think it was like, that's two. Yeah. You know, whatever. I don't really practice before I do this, so I'm just going with it. But you know. I've got some, you know, kind of, I don't know, I'm sure you noticed some panning kind of set up with the, I always like setting this to the XY pad to control the rate. You can kind of some, I mean, that's some aggressive stereo, but like a little bit. This can sound really nice. But you can, so getting back to what you're talking about, right? So I got a little bit distracted. But if we are, you know, so the usable parts of this see up here. Let me mute the second and third layers. I believe like this. Oh no, that's solo. Yeah, there we go. So nothing plays up here. This is the last usable note that I found for this particular when I was doing phase modulation on, or I should say, modulating the phase of the oscillator, things start getting wonky. So another cool thing, we're getting, like I said, I might start talking about phase modulation. But if we were to take a look at this, this actually, so when you do modulation, sometimes you get things get out of tune. And one of the nice things about the Moog 1 is over on the left-hand control in the moar section, you can transpose layers independently. So this is actually transposed down 4 semitones to make it in tune with these other layers. But so this was the oh, that's why shift is on. So if we go back to soloing, just soloing the first layer, right, this is the last usable note. So what I ended up doing was just layering a tuned layer as well as a you know, kind of an upper layer to make it all blend together well. You really can't tell that those are 3 separate layers, but they are. And so that's one of the tricks you can do when you're doing this stuff is if you start getting wonky sounds, just don't use those. Use the usable part because like all these different types of modulation, like audio rate modulation, FM modulation, you get such interesting textures. Like if we go back to that first patch, you know, it just like, there are all these weird little kind of artifacts that pop up, and it definitely happens more like on analog synths because it's just, I don't know, it's just how they are. Whereas if you know, if I do this over on the Iridium, it sounds ultra clean, right? Like super duper clean, but this, the idea. This is a cool patch. One tip I would recommend everyone do when they're doing any type of you know, patch that you really want to play, if it's not like supposed to sound kind of like a funk lead or something like that, especially like keys, like poly patches, don't forget to go in, pretty much every synth has it practically, and mess with the velocity modulation amount on your different envelopes. It makes a huge difference. That's why this is so... How much time do I have? Oh my god, 7 minutes. So it makes a huge difference when you're doing sound design. So I don't have that much time. Why don't I have a lot of time? Because I have this old... I got a new camera. It costs like $1,200. It's obviously pretty great and it allows me to show you guys this. The other camera that I have that I'm pointing at right now is old and it can only record like 29 minutes of video. It's something to do with how stuff gets formatted on the older DSLR cameras or something. So I would love to get a new one, but I don't really want to spend another $1,200. So in the comments, let me know if you guys would be interested in helping me fund another camera, and then I will actually start to make more videos, because one of the things is it's just a pain in the ass to set this up, and then for my style, I'm not going to cut and edit stuff, so I just really want to be able to, shoot for like 30 minutes and not be stressed about the time. But getting back to the time, let's hear another patch. So what do we got here? Here's another one. Cool, right? Let's do another one. Oh, here's a cool one. I think I called this, I don't know if it was Miami Vice, but is that the, and then there's a remake with Colin Farrell. Is this the, And again, when you have when you mess around with like, with FM, you get these interesting harmonics that sounds very unusable, right? But when you filter it out, suddenly you get like a very interesting sound that is quite usable. So, I mean, I got a lot of these different patches. Oh, wait, what's this? And you can get kind of more, I don't know, this kind of sounds like a guitar, like add some slapback delay. That kind of thing. Yeah, it's got a cool surf rock vibe. And I think that's any others I wanted to show you. I think that's pretty much it for now. Oh, I didn't do this one. It was going so well. I only have a little time left, and I did really want to, I can't even tell how much time I have. It looks like 7 minutes, but it could also be 3. I think it's probably 3. Let's do a little more sound design. So, initialize patch. I like to use triangle waves because they don't have harmonics and they're going to introduce a bunch. The Moog one can then take, oh, we didn't even talk about linear FM. So that's what this does. It does linear FM. Getting back to our maths, linear FM basically, instead of modulating the voltage, right? So that will actually modulate the frequencies. And you can go, let's say 100 hertz and 100 hertz above and below whatever note you're playing. So if it's A440, we go down to, what is that? 330 hertz and 500, or 340 hertz and 540 hertz. And so the average of those two is A440. So it'll stay in tune as you modulate much longer than the other. The trade-off is that you don't get as deep of a modulation, and then sometimes you do get these kind of snapping to kind of different harmonics, or fundamentals, I should say. You can hear it right there. If the carrier wave is a little higher, right? So the wave, or the frequency that's being modulated is higher, you can get keep it in tune for much longer. So just keep that in mind. And this is a really good way to get like kind of Rhodes piano sounds. And let's say we were to send the modulation envelope to this a little bit. It's a little wonky, right? But if we we start getting some motion. So yeah, I definitely only have 30 seconds left until I'm cut off and I leave you again, but I will do some more videos, and I hope this was helpful. If you want me to do a more in-depth video about FM, if you really want to learn about this stuff, Google, YouTube, listen to some people talk about like radio towers and old radios and things like that. And until next time, thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe, hit the notification thing, and I will see you next time. Yeah, we'll do this.